Okay, here we are with episode 2 of the Ronin Author. I am your host, Ryan McGinnis. I am a web designer, the owner of a t-shirt shop of all things, and a self-published author. I started this podcast so we could kind of go on the self-publishing journey together. You know, if you're a self-published author, you know, that we can kind of walk this path together and kind of learn from each other, and that this podcast could be somewhat of a support group for self-published authors. This is episode number 2, and I'm getting to use one of my favorite phrases as the title of this episode, which is everything is a work in progress. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean? I mean that, you know, a lot of times in life, we're taught to strive for perfection. We're taught that everything has to be perfect the first time out. If it's not perfect, then it's crap. You know, people are going to judge you. People are going to, you know, completely dismiss you. And I just don't think that's true. And I think that puts a lot of undue pressure on people and on authors to perform at a level that, that is just unattainable. You know, if you're aiming for perfection, you are going to fail because you're going to put too much pressure on yourself, and you're going to be too critical of yourself when you do come out with stuff. And that's if you come out with stuff. Because I know a lot of people who strive for perfection, that they're constantly working on their next great book, or their work in progress, or whatever you want to call it. And they're constantly working on it. They're constantly tweaking it. They're just trying to make it perfect. And they never end up coming out with it. You know, I have a friend who it took him, I think, 8 years to come out with an album. And it was great. But I think about how if he hadn't have spent so much time trying to be, you know, just right with it, he could have come out with it years ago and a lot more people could have heard it, you know. So that's kind of what I mean by that. I mean, I'm not of the opinion that we need to be absolutely perfect. We're only human. We make mistakes. I mean, you'll see me make mistakes on these podcasts and say stuff that, you know, might not be exactly perfect, but I leave it on here. You know, I don't take it off because that's kind of the whole point, you know, is we want to be human. We want to be authentic, you know. I'm okay with you guys seeing that I'm not the perfect video host. You know, I'm not perfect at making videos. You know, I do the best I can and I improve, you know. See, the thing is, I think when you're an author, when you're a self-published author, or when you're deciding that you're going to be a self-published author, much like, you know, if you're going to be a Ronin in ancient Japan, if you were going to be a Ronin, because this is what this is, the Ronin Author. If you were going to be a Ronin, you had to train for years. You had to get really good at what you do. And so as a self-published author, you also need to train. You know, you also need to learn. I researched for far too long, moving forward with my author career. It was more of, I think in the early days, my author career was more of a hobby when I was leading up to it. And I didn't get serious about it until, you know, years later. But like, for instance, when I first started, I know I've probably told you guys this story before, but my wife, well, people that follow my channel, I haven't said it on the podcast, but a long time ago, I've always had a really big imagination. I grew up out in the woods of North Carolina in a rural setting, and I had a really big imagination that helped fill my days and helped fill my nights. And, you know, lots of crafting, lots of playing with action figures, lots of planning out entire episodes of TV shows in my head. And years later, decades later, my wife told me, hey, you know, you've got such a good imagination. You're such a good storyteller. Why don't you write some books? I was like, hey, that's not a bad idea. And so I came up with a lot of ideas, and I wrote up these little synopsises, some of them being just a couple paragraphs to give me an idea of what the book was going to be. Some of them were, you know, fully formed books where I wrote each chapter as a paragraph. And, you know, so I had this document that had like 50 something paragraphs in it. And so I didn't know it at the time, but I was being a plotter, you know, and I was laying out my plot. And so every paragraph was a chapter, and so all I had to do when I sat down to write was take each paragraph and turn it into a chapter. And so it's a pretty good system. I still stick with it for the most part nowadays, even though I found out that sometimes stories take on a life of their own, and so sometimes you have to incorporate a little bit of pantsing, which we'll talk about that in a future episode. But that was pretty much my start. But when I did when I did the first few synopsises, there was a long time where I didn't write anything, and then I started to try to write some stuff, and then I disregarded it. And so it was kind of a hobby for years and years. And then I might write a chapter and then go like a few months and then write another chapter, and stuff like that. And then as I got serious about it, I started really studying my craft, and I started writing blogs for clients, for myself, for whoever. Whoever would take me. I would write for entertainment, journals or zines or whatever, just to get the practice in and just to get my skills built up. And I think that's important. I think I took way too long. But that's part of the journey. So anyway, I finally, when I got serious about it, I finished my first book. I finished the first draft of my first book in the summer of 2020. Now, as many of you know, that was when the pandemic hit. And so everything was shut down. Everything was crazy. The pandemic was everywhere. And I decided to not release the book yet because I was afraid it wouldn't get the coverage that it should get. And we spent a year kind of learning, because I didn't know. I didn't know how anything worked, So I spent like a year learning to edit my book, learning how to edit my book, what we should go through. I mean, we went through like 5 drafts. I read the book so many times that I was just, I was so tired of reading it by the end of it, and if you guys are an author, you know what I mean. But I also spent that year kind of learning how to market it, what I should and shouldn't do, and also working on a cover, and so I finally came out with the book about a year later in 2021, and I was very proud of it. I think it was in the spring of 2021, and I was really proud of it. Was it perfect? No, it wasn't perfect. I still probably wasn't quite where I needed to be, but I just figured I needed to put it out there. Because what I've learned over the years as a web designer and in my other professions is that, sharing imperfect work is better than sharing nothing while waiting for perfection. You can put a website out there, you can put a book out there, you can put a video out there, and it's not perfect, but it's reaching people. And it's familiarizing people with you and with your brand and with what you're all about. And so striving for perfection, I think, is a mistake. I think we need to strive to be the best we can be, but we also need to create. We also need to put stuff out, because in the end, perfection is not your friend. In the end, we need to work hard to get stuff out. We need to be consistent, because as I've said in the other video, consistency is the key. You need to put stuff out. You need to keep in touch with your fan base. You need to be consistent, and you need to not worry about having things be absolutely perfect, because everything is a work in progress. So we'll see you guys next time.